Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today for Diagnosing and Solving SEO Problems. This is a four-part framework for overcoming your organic search challenges. My name is Jen Spencer, and I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing here at SmartBug Media. I'm so excited for you to get to hear from Paul. Paul is one of our senior marketing strategists here at SmartBug and sort of our resident SEO expert. Before I pass it over to him, just wanted to let you know we are recording this webinar, and tomorrow you will receive a recording of it. We can also provide the slide deck, so you can actually just engage, enjoy the webinar, and don't need to worry about taking too many notes. And if there's anyone else you know who would enjoy it, you can share it with them as well. So we also have some questions that folks asked prior to the webinar. Thank you so much. We're going to carve out some time at the end of the webinar to answer those questions and then any questions that come up along the way. So feel free to use the Q&A feature here in the Zoom webinar to share your questions with us. If we run out of time, Paul will answer questions offline after the fact. So without further ado, Paul, why don't you take it from here?
All right, thanks, Jen, and thanks everybody for coming to the webinar today. Really excited to share some SEO troubleshooting advice with you and some things that you can use in your own roles. So to set an agenda for today, I just want to discuss the four major forces of SEO. I'll give you a framework for diagnosing some of the issues, as well as give you some types of analyses that you can use to help diagnose any SEO problems or any challenges that you're seeing. Next, we'll walk through what are the specific tools that you need to have in your SEO tool belt in your day-to-day. And then lastly, we'll save some time for Q&A. And as Jen said, feel free to jump in with any questions. Really excited to hear from you guys and what you're working on. So right away, let's look at the four forces of SEO. What are the elements that are impacting your ability to show up in search, in organic search specifically? So right off the bat, we have algorithmic, technical, seasonality, and competitive. These are the four major forces, and we're going to walk through each one in detail. These different forces will impact your overall presence in search engines, and it may be a single force that's impacting when you see a change in your organic traffic or conversions. It could be one of these four forces, or it could be a combination of several of them. So let's look at the top of first in looking at algorithmic force. So algorithmic force, what this is looking at is with changes in search algorithms, how is that affecting your organic performance? There's a lot of different things that can be affecting on the algorithmic side. Some examples of algorithmic changes would be a MEDDIC update, for example. MEDDIC update's one of the many updates that Google has put out there over time. This one was from last year. Other algorithmic changes that you may see that affect your search presence are increases in the amount of featured snippets. This is not necessarily a large algorithmic change. It's more so looking at the front end and seeing that there are certain elements that Google puts within the search engine result pages that will affect your ability to rank. And then lastly, there's another example is just increasing the amount of ads on a search engine result page. Google's a business. They make most of their money off search ads, and so we think about that. They have to have a fine balance between being able to make money with running ads and being able to create a good user experience. But all of these are algorithmic elements, examples. The next one is technical. So when we look at the technical force of SEO, technical relates to anything that's on your website that are changes that you make on your website, either on the front end or on the back end. These could be impacting your organic performance. So technical doesn't always mean you have to get deep into HTML to understand what those changes are. Some of these technical changes can be more things on the front end. If you're using some sort of WYSIWYG editor, you're changing copy on a page, that can be a technical change. So there's examples of technical changes could be adding a new section of content. That is a technical change. If you're merging two websites into one, that's a pretty big technical change that search engines are going to re-index and re-rank your website. Another example is just moving to secured hosting. So that would be another one. All of these are examples of that. Next is seasonality. So if we look at seasonality, some of this is outside of your control because seasonality is changes in time affecting your organic performance. So seasonality can mean the literal changing of seasons, going from one season to the next, and that impacting your people searching for your product or service. But seasonality can also show its face in other ways. For example, fiscal years are different for different clients. Holidays, that impacts seasonality. And then economic cycles, that's not necessarily a 365-day seasonal phase. It could be several years. So that's another example of seasonality. And then lastly is competitive pressures. So if we look at competitive pressures, this can be your direct competitors that are coming in and they're trying to outrank you in search. That's definitely the most obvious competitive force. But there can also be new companies that are launching or merging, or companies that are getting acquired, and those are starting to compete with you within search. Other competitive pressures may not even be actual competitors. They may be just brands or even publications that are competing for the same keywords that you're going after. So that's another pressure of competitiveness. They can be direct competitors. They can be indirect competitors. So all in all, these are like the four major forces. And again, these can be used in, you can be one force that's impacting your SEO. It could be several at once. So how do we go about diagnosing the problems using web analytics and different SEO tools? If we look at the algorithmic force of SEO, what I like to look at first is, with search engine changes, what are things that are happening? This is one really valuable place that you can be using to help to potentially identify what the algorithmic issue is. With this Google algorithmic change history from Moz, you can go in and you can see the changes that are happening over time. And Moz keeps this pretty up to date in terms of major updates that are happening in search. There are thousands of search engine ranking signals. So you have to keep that in mind, that not every single time there's a change in the weight of a signal is that going to be documented on here. But for some of the major updates, you will see that on here. So when you look at this, if you're looking at your own traffic and you see that there's a big drop in traffic at a certain date, what happened during that time period? So what you can do in this case is, does the data, when you look at the drop in traffic or the rise in traffic, is it sudden? And does that sudden change in traffic, does that correlate to a date on the calendar? Was there a major update that happened in there? So I'd like to look at that first. Was there any sort of major changes that happened within Google or search engines that could impact that? And typically these algorithmic changes can be pretty severe in one way or another. So if you look at that, that major change that happened, there's a few things that could be at stake there. When you see a big algorithmic change that has happened, it could be that you've been penalized for web spam or for one of the many issues that could cause you to get penalized and get a manual action. So this is one potential area. When I correlate big drops or increases in traffic, I like to go to Google Search Console first, just to see if this is if Google Search Console is telling me anything around my website. And any issues that they're detecting as to why may not be performing or being indexed properly. But not all declines due to an algorithmic change are necessarily manual action penalties. So you're not always going to see this within Google Search Console if you are affected algorithmically. Sometimes the algorithm just reweighs certain factors, and you may see a decline without seeing a manual action penalty. So another place you can go to kind of see if what's happening in search, if this is an algorithmic change that's happening as you're trying to diagnose the issue, is within Moz. There's a good Mozcast, and they'll tell you and show you if there's an increase in specific SERP features. Sometimes there's SERP features that will continue to increase over time. And if there's a specific SERP feature that's increasing over time, that may be pushing your normal organic listings farther down if you're not showing up as a featured listing, featured SERP. So this is something else to take a look at. Are there certain features that potentially pushing you down if you're not showing up within one of those features? And so when you think we come back and look at how do we overcome some of these algorithmic problems, it's, we really need to understand if we're going to diagnose it's an algorithmic problem, we need to understand like the data when some of these algorithmic changes happen. This can, like I said, you can look inside of Moz and see that. You can also, there's a lot of SEO forums and SEO publications that'll also document the changes of what's happening within search, and you can see if that correlates to changes that has occurred. And if that correlation does exist between an algorithmic change and when your traffic increased or decreased, then try to identify the scale and severity of that issue. Is it a major change or is it something small? And again, there's a lot of resources out there from Google and the SEO industry that help you identify some solutions around that depending on what the change was. And then lastly, if no correlation exists, then check Google Search Console for manual action penalties, look at Mozcast for SERP feature movements. And if you're still not identifying that, it may not be an algorithmic issue. And in that case, you can start to go down to the next part of this, and you can start to look at technical. So when we look at the technical force of SEO, how do we diagnose an issue there? Here's a really helpful infographic that just looks at the different on-site factors that you do control. When we look at technical, there's a lot of things that span from the copy that's on your web pages to the URLs that you have, all the way to the backend, and looking at the user experience and how your website is laid out, how well search engines can crawl that. Technical also relates to redirects that you use. So technical can be a lot of different things on there, but this really refers to the on-site factors that you can control. So things that are that you can that you see, these are some technical changes. So again, if you're looking at if you're adding content to your website, that's a technical change. If you're if you're adding new web pages, or you're taking web pages down, or you're consolidating pages, those are technical changes, and those can impact your organic search presence. Deleting content, anytime if you're merging websites, or if you're migrating to a new CMS, for example, you may be consolidating content, or the way that your blog is structured, there may be less blog listing pages, or they may be formatted differently. And so anytime you're doing large changes like that, if you're deleting content, this can impact your search presence. And then there's things on the back end that you don't see, which are technical areas around redirects, or how your robots.txt file is set up, how your sitemaps are set up. So these are other areas too that they're not visible from the front end when you go to your homepage, but they could be making an impact on the technical side. So what does this look like then from an analytics perspective? When you think about technical issues, sometimes they can be pretty severe. Like if you forget to, or if you just don't use the 301 redirects and you just move to a new website and you delete a bunch of content, like that can be pretty drastic shift in your organic traffic. But you may also see in the technical side is that these changes that you do to your website accumulate, and they affect you either adversely or positively. But you can see in some cases, like the types of changes when you're looking at your analytics, it may not be just a sudden drop in traffic. It can be a steady decline over time. an increase over time. So it's important to understand what is happening over time, so you can see if it's a technical issue. So when you're trying to understand if it's a technical issue or not, you need to understand what is the history of your website. Is the history of your website, have you gone through a redesign? Have you consolidated domains into one? Have you added a blog onto your website and you're constantly publishing content now? Or have you deleted a bunch of content? Have you moved from WordPress to HubSpot or vice versa? Have you changed your hosting provider so now that you're maybe on a quicker hosting provider? Have you launched any major campaigns? Anytime you launch new content in your website, that's a technical change to your website. So, as you're thinking about your analytics, it's really important that you understand the history and you're documenting that. It's really hard if you try to think 6 months back from what happened today. What did I do in my website? So within Google Analytics, here's one way that you can annotate this information. Anytime you're making a big change to your website, make sure you write down the date of when this happened. Google Analytics, you can store that right in the analytics platform, and it puts these little speech bubbles in terms of when those changes happened. So write it down there, or write it down in a spreadsheet or Google Doc. So that way, over time, you really understand how any major changes are affecting your traffic. And sometimes when you make a change on your website, it's going to take a little while for that to show up. So that's why you like to look back at a timeline view and try to correlate back to when a major change or a major campaign launch happened. Some tools that you can be using to diagnose technical issues. This is one of our favorites, is Screaming Frog, and you can do a crawl your entire website, every single page, every single file on your website. There's not really a limit to this, but this is one of the more advanced tools that we use to just see if there are technical issues, from looking at status codes or looking at redirects, looking at if the website is optimized, or looking if there's any crawling issues. Understanding how the website is internally linked. This is a really powerful tool. And if you don't have Screaming Frog, there are other tools that you can use out there. You can also, if you don't have a crawling tool, you can just pull your list of your URLs from your favorite analytics tool, whether that's GA or HubSpot or whatever you're using. And then from there, there's tools like this httpstatus.io, where you can take your URLs and you can run them through a tool like this, just to understand if the issue is redirects. So that's one way you can do it. I would caution you to not just pull like the pages from your analytics platform, because the pages that are showing up in your analytics platform may only be the pages that you're getting traffic for. But it may be the pages that you're not getting traffic for that are creating an impediment for search engine spiders to crawl your website. So if possible, try to use something like a Screaming Frog, a crawler. There's another crawler you can use called Zeno, and I'll share the link on that. And that's a free tool that you can use. So once you put your web pages through either Screaming Frog or a tool like httpstatus.io, it'll spit out what are the status codes. And so if you look at status codes, that's one big technical issue we see with clients across the board. Is there either incorrect use of those, or they're just there's broken links and they're just showing up and they're not even pages anymore. And so it's important just to familiarize yourself with some of the status codes that are out there, some of the important ones. There's right ways and wrong ways to implement different status, different redirects, and so it's important that you know what those different codes mean. Here's just some examples of right ways and wrong ways to implement some of those redirects. And here's another tool. It's similar to Screaming Frog. It's a free tool, but you can check on this, and this is something that anybody can download. I think this only works on Windows, but it's still a useful tool if you can get access to it. So once you've pulled a list of all of your URLs from your favorite crawling tool, from there, identify if there's any broken links. Are there 404s? Are there pages that you're directing people to that don't show up? that people can't, they're not redirecting anywhere that are broken. Are there any like non-SEO friendly redirects, 302s, that you're seeing within that list of URLs? If possible, you want to get those updated to 301 if possible. And then look at your list of pages. Are you finding that there's just globs of website that are really low quality or thin? If you have a lot of content that's thin and there's just not a lot of content on the page, maybe they're really old pages, think about putting together a plan for that. You can redirect some pages if they're not really getting not pulling any search, not pulling any value for your website. Think about redirecting them or consolidating them. Or if the pages do provide value and the topic's still relevant, can think about expanding those pages. But don't just let hundreds of pages sit there if they're really low quality and not providing value for your users. It can really impact both user experience as well as you showing up in search. As you're looking at your list of URLs, identify any duplicate content that you have. Are you seeing sometimes with certain CMSs, you can create duplicate content and you didn't even mean to. It just happens based on how the CMS is configured. So if so, in this case, figure out how you're going to deal with duplicate content. If you don't deal with your duplicate content, then search engines will make assumptions for you in terms of which page will rank within search. And then as you pull a list of your URLs, look at, make sure you're not blocking any of your important pages from your robots.txt file. You can find, if you're not familiar with robots.txt, you can go to this specific URL. You can type in your own URL right in the middle here and then /robots.txt, and that'll show you which pages that search engines are seeing that we're essentially telling them not to crawl or to crawl. Some other technical issues that we see with clients is the use of too many pop-ups and tracking scripts. I'm sure you've seen this as you go to many publications. There's just a lot of pop-ups. Asking if they can send notifications, push notifications, asking if you want to subscribe. This is a technical decision that websites make on their website, which impacts both SEO and your user experience. So just be careful with the amount of pop-ups and tracking scripts that you have on their website. They can harm page load speed. They can also make your visitors very angry. So these can both harm your SEO. And there's certain tracking scripts too that can increase the amount of time it takes for your pages to load, which is, again, a bad signal from a search perspective. So, if you are using tracking scripts, Lucky Orange, Crazy Egg, for example, just consider using them on sections of your website that you're trying to test something. You're trying to test, maybe you want to test a heat map on a new landing page that you just built. Consider just using them sparingly and like where you need to test something. If you're trying to track every single page and you're trying to get all this data, and if you're not using it, it may not always be beneficial from a page load speed perspective. Another technical area is to just make sure that you submit your sitemap within Google Search Console. Very easy. If you go into the new Google Search Console, you can see sitemaps on the left side, and then you can put in your sitemap. Depending on the CMS you have, they may or may not generate a sitemap for you. But this is where you go in there to show search engines, here's a list of all the pages on my website. And so that's the technical area. Next, we'll move on to seasonality. So every business they have a degree of seasonality. It doesn't matter if you're B2B, B2C. There's going to be some seasonality in play. And so one tool that you should be familiar with is Google Trends. When you think about your own business, put your main topics into Google Trends to see like when you're seeing spikes in traffic or when you're seeing spikes in overall search demand for that topic, rather. That's what Google Trends will tell us. It'll tell us when are more and more people searching for this. So it's important to map that out. Every business has that. So if you look at this example, this is search demand for Roth IRA. So you can see it really spikes during tax season. People are searching for that kind of information. Here's another example. You're buying a home. At the end of the year, the number of queries for people searching for buying a home starts to dwindle, and then it really spikes it right at the beginning of the year when people start thinking about buying again. So map that out, what your different topics are. And when you map out your topics, look to see, do those topics, does the demand for those search topics, does it correlate to your search volume on your website? So if you look like this top screen right here, this is showing our actual analytics, and then the bottom screen is looking at Google Trends. So overlay the data on top of one another. If you see that the overall seasonality of search demand aligns with your traffic, then it could be you diagnose more of a seasonal issue, and you diagnose that, look, people just aren't searching for these types of solutions at this time, and we need to find other ways to be able to generate traffic and generate business even during the slower months. So here's another example, kind of how to approach that. So if you think about patio furniture, obviously you get a lot of people searching for that during the summertime, and then it kind of dwindles down during the rest of the year. So what do you do in this case? If people are only searching for your products during some times of the year, the real solution that you can think about doing is aligning your content creation efforts with those seasonal topics. So in this example, during the winter times, maybe you don't have as many people searching for patio furniture, but people still do spend time outside in the wintertime. They like to hang outside and barbecue and whatnot. And think about the types of topics that you could still be writing about, creating content for, to overcome those seasonal challenges that you may have on your own site. One way you can do that is just to map out your topics over the year. So in this case, map out your topic seasonality, like we looked at within Google Trends, of mapping the major topic, the major product lines that you sell or major categories that you target, and overlay that with other areas that your personas may be interested in. For example, like we talked about when outdoor heating, maybe that there's certain times of year that's going to be more relevant. People are going to be searching for that topic. Just think about like the other types of topics that may not coincide with your major categories that you're targeting, and try to add those to your calendar and see if those are areas that you can still be helpful and relevant to your personas. Also, map out external events that are happening in holidays or pop culture events that are happening, and put those on your calendar, because those are ways you can really like take advantage of search demand for some of these external events that are happening, and tie those in with your products and topics that your prospects are interested in. And then lastly, overlay that with your internal event calendar. You can see that on here if there's like certain trade shows that you're going throughout the year, or if you're launching specific products, you've got specific initiatives happening in the company, overlay that on one place. So it's really easy to understand what topics are people interested in right now, what company events are happening, and then what external events are happening. And if you can lay this out for your own company and the types of topics you're targeting, you can really map out the specific pieces of content to align with the overall seasonality of search. And then lastly, competitive. So competitive pressures affecting overall performance in search. So what does that look like? Ride shares, obviously this is a big one. More and more ride share companies popping up over the last decade. And when you see that, what does that look like from an analytics perspective? So if you're from the analytics side, whether you're winning or you're losing to your competition, typically season or competitive pressures, they're not going to have a drastic jump, or you're not going to see a drastic jump or drop in your traffic. Oftentimes it's going to be a little bit more sloping, either upwards or downwards as you have more traffic, or as you have more people searching for that. And this is really going to depend on, if the amount of competition, if it kind of goes in line with the overall demand of people searching for that. So that's how drastic you're going to be able to see overall competitive pressure. So if you're trying to diagnose the issue, this is often what it can look like. And so if you look at that again, coming back to Google Trends, look at your overall search demand for a topic over time. Are you continuing to see growth of search demand over time? And is that overall growth aligning with your traffic numbers? So that can be a big part in diagnosing a competitive issue. So what if you do have a competitive issue? What are some ways that you can counteract that? First off is just to put your own brand and your direct competitors who sell the same product and put those into a spreadsheet or some table so you can understand how well do you rank for certain topics compared to your direct competitors. And so if you do this sort of analysis, you can see that there may be certain competitors that are doing very well for the types of topics you want to be ranking well for. In that case, how do you handle that? Well, you can go and see what your competitors are doing well to rank for that. What are the pages that they have on their website? What's the content that they have on their website? And being able to use that to help inform some ideas that you will have for your own website. So this is one way I would do that. You can pull this sort of analyses from Moz and SEMrush and many tools, but this is just looking at your overall rankings for your own topics. You can also use do an SEO share of voice analyses. And what this looks at is for a set of given topics that you're trying to rank for, what are all the brands that are trying to rank for that? And many times you're going to be competing against websites that don't even sell the same product as you. And so, if you're a software solution, for example, you may be competing in the search results against Capterra, Software Advice, software review websites. You may be competing against big players like Amazon. And so that's why when we look at this, the SEO share voice analyses, you can identify types of websites that you can go get some inspiration from as well and see what they're doing well to be able to show up in the SERPs and the same SERPs that you want to be showing up in. And here's a post, it's at the bottom if you want to see how you can do that kind of analyses yourself based on ranked data. You can also do a competitive link analysis. This is an example from Moz, but again, there's other tools that you can see this, but put your own brand up against other competitors and see the overall number of linking root domains that your competitors have compared to you. This is a snapshot. So, if you look at the snapshot data, it's going to really tell you, if you look at followed linking domains, which is the bottom row, how much work are you going to have to put in to be able to outrank some of these top competitors if you're going to go after them from a link building perspective. I put SmartBug Media against some of the big marketing and sales software platforms. And so you could see if we were to try to outrank some of these bigger platforms, it's going to be a little bit more difficult than if we were competing against if we had put it up against a small website. So just keep that in mind. This is just a good snapshot to show you the overall amount of effort you will have to put in to outrank your competition. And in some cases, like trying to compete with your direct competitors via link building is not always the best method. So keep that in mind as well. Also do a content analysis. What can we learn from our competitors about the types of content that they're producing, the types of internal link structure that they have? What can we learn from them to be able to outrank them, and what do we need to invest in to outrank them in search? Some other, if you look at competitive sides, still another thing you can be looking at is the overall SERP features. So you've seen more and more SERP features come over time. You've seen the search engine result page just become more and more bloated with different types of listings inside there. And so if we look at SERP features, you can use different analytics platforms, whether it's SEMrush or Moz, and you can see, what are the types of topics that you can actually show up within search for one of those SERP features. There's lots of different SERP features. And not every single keyword or topic that you have is going to have many different types of SERP features. So do an analysis of that to see if there are ways that you can stand out by showing up as with one of those. And so those are the four major forces of SEO. By going through that exercise, you can use process of elimination to understand what has happened to your website over time. Whenever you see a drop or a rapid increase in traffic, and whether that's one force or many forces, you can go through that methodology to help you identify what that is and put a plan in place to go forward with that. So as you're building your own SEO tool belt, here are some of the major tools that I would have for each of those forces. So on the competitive side, you need some marketing web analytics, Excel, Google Trends, Moz, SEMrush. Those are tools you can use. Excel, you'll use marketing and web analytics across the board, and Excel just to help you do these types of analyses. On the algorithmic side, you'll also pull in Google Webmaster Trends, the Moz algorithm calendar. On the technical side, check out Screaming Frog, check out Xenu. These are great crawling tools that help you pull a list of all of your pages. So then you can go through those and understand if there's issues with redirects, if there are other sorts of technical issues that are impeding search engines from crawling your site. And then lastly, seasonality. So, check out Google Trends. This is a really helpful tool to see how, what's the overall search demand over time, and then map your trends across the year, overlay that with your own industry events, and overlay that with pop culture events and holiday calendars. And with that, we'll take your questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. This is my brain is full right now, and I can't wait to even go back and watch this again and dig through some of your slides. I do have some questions here that were submitted. So first one here from Rod. He says he was advised to change some of the keywords on a website to get better ranking. So he says, if I change the primary keyword in my H1 tab, will I lose the ranking for that page? He says that we're currently on page 1, position 4.
Yeah, that's a good question, Rod. On-page keyword targeting, it's an important element of you being able to rank. It's on that technical side that we're looking at. Depending on the competitiveness of that term, changing the keyword in the H1 or the title tag, it could affect your rank. However, it's important to look at, from your prospect's point of view, which version of the H1 would better resonate with them. How do you do that? Well, you can interview your personas. You should be interviewing your personas on a rolling basis every 3-6 months, talking to your customers and getting that feedback. And you can run those types of questions by them to see what are the phrases that they would be using as they search for this topic. So really look at that. You can also test it if you swap out the keyword and your rank changes. You can test those sorts of things, but I would really keep your own customer in mind and what kinds of phrases do they use in their day-to-day, and that's the kind of angle that I would take for that.
Awesome. All right, so here's another question that was asked previously. This is was asked by Beth. She says, we rank well for our target keywords in the US, but are struggling internationally. What is the best way to target international countries on a US-based website that is only in English? We're a global organization with single pages for our global locations. Is our only option to get targeted international content on those pages and try to get links?
Yeah, that's a good question, Beth. There's a lot of variables when it comes to international SEO. If your product is used globally, you may consider having separate sections of your website or even entirely different domains targeting different languages for your product. It really depends on the size of your website and brand and how much market you're trying to go after in that space. Depending on the competitiveness of the product in the other markets, you may need more than just a single location landing page, though, to be able to rank for that term in that specific market. You mentioned links, so links are going to play a part of it, play into that as you're saying. If you can get local relevant links pointing to those location pages of those location sections of your website, that can definitely help you rank in those markets. In some of those markets, if you have affiliates or partners in those markets, see if you can get links from those first. That's kind of your low-hanging fruit. You can also use Google Search Console to target certain countries for different parts of your website. If you're trying to target 5 different countries, for example, and you've got 5 sections of your website, you can use Google Search Console. And you can create separate profiles to tell Google, I want this specific section of our website to show up when users in this country are targeting that. Just be careful though, because if you're they're in Europe, there's certain languages that speak in multiple countries, and if you're only targeting a specific country, you may not be showing up as well in some of the neighboring countries that also speak that same language. So just keep that in mind. And then, if you're thinking about just your own website ranking in that other country, what other websites could you be listed on within that country? For example, for home remodeling or repair services, you think about Home Advisor. If I need a service provider, I may not be just searching for a specific kind of service provider, like a specific plumbing brand. I may want to go to a marketplace like a Home Advisor or a Yelp, and I may be trying to search there before I pinpoint the specific brand I want to work with. So just keep in mind other websites that you could also show up for when people are searching for that specific topic.
Very, very good. There's a live question that let's go to one of those. We have others that were pre-loaded over, sent over to us earlier, but let's answer this one live for AJ. So AJ wants to know, what impact does media like video on the page have? How do you program video SEO keywords? Is it around the video or inside the video? Paul, what do you think about the impact of video on search?
That's a good question, AJ. You think about video, at the end of the day, we're trying to build our websites for our prospects and our customers. And so does video enhance the overall user experience for them, or does it take away that? When people are doing a search within search engines and they end up on your website, if they stick around and they find your video content helpful and they're not bouncing back into the search engines and trying to find a different website that answers their question, then if they're staying in your website, that's a positive signal from search, and you can be rewarded just from a UX perspective because people are staying on your website. So from a crawlability perspective, though, you may consider having copy that's around your video, whether above your video or below your video. Just gives it a little bit of a description of what's on your video. Sometimes we use transcriptions of the video, depending on how long the video is. But if possible, if you can get some surrounding copy just to provide a little more context to what's on that video, that's going to be helpful for crawlers to understand the actual text that's on your website. It's also going to be helpful for your prospects, though, that are on your website to understand what's on the video. So I would have some sort of copy around it, including your keywords within some of that copy to have on side there. But I think there's a couple things in play there, UX and then the actual keywords on your copy.
I know, Paul, for, as far as SmartBug marketing goes, we have a really high performing page, and we're actually experimenting with adding video to the page to improve the engagement and the user experience on that page as part of our SEO efforts. So, well, as that rolls out, we can test that and report to all of you on that success.
Yep, great test.
All right, another question. This is from Sharon. She shared that she's about to work with a small nonprofit that wants to expand their research and mission. And currently, they have very little SEO going on. She's going to be upgrading their website as they reconsider how they want to be known. So her question is, if there are any specific SEO tactics that a nonprofit needs to take to get the best ranking.
Yeah, so SEO tactics for a nonprofit aren't going to be a whole lot different than a for-profit website. A few things that may deviate a bit are, one, where you're building your links from. Nonprofits, there's probably specific nonprofit listing websites or category-specific nonprofit websites that you're going to want to build to get links from, earn links from. So that may be something to think about. Social proof, which we didn't talk a whole lot about, that there may be certain signals, certain trust signals that someone that's coming to a nonprofit website may want to see, and by seeing that social proof, they may be more inclined to want to work with you or donate or whatever it is you're trying to accomplish with your website. So the type of social proof might be a little bit different. The types of keywords that you're going to be targeting, those should be specific to the types of audiences that you're serving. Again, this is for-profit, nonprofit, but if you're thinking about your specific nonprofit, how can you be a little bit more granular with who you're targeting? Are you a localized nonprofit, or are you a nonprofit that's services a specific vertical or a specific kind of audience? So really think about the vertical that really think about the niche that you're trying to fill. Don't try to boil the ocean and try to rank for every nonprofit term. Really think specifically about the types of phrases that your personas are using. We do this with every one of our clients is we interview their customers. And then we take that and we look at the transcriptions of what the customers are saying, and we pull the data from there to really understand what those phrases are. So do the same thing. Go interview your personas and record that and transcribe it and see what are the phrases that they use. And that's kind of how I would differentiate it, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit.
Excellent point. And that's something that's, I think, I know nonprofits, Paul, are frequently a bit budget conscious, right? More budget conscious than for-profits. But that's something that is that's free or very, very affordable to be able to do, right? Mm-hmm. All right, this next question, Paul, you're basically trying to solve an argument. So preface that. This is from June. Said that she was watching a webinar that another organization had done. It was a few weeks ago, and they were evaluating a website's resource page. And the comments were that Google wouldn't be able to read anything on that resource page because Google doesn't do well with hover animation. So, which that prompted her to do some additional research and found another video from a couple of years ago about the way that Google handles CSS and JavaScript and hidden text. And that hidden text is actually still crawled, but is weighted less by Google. So what she's wondering is, who's right? What are the SEO-friendly website design tips? Should hover animation and accordions be avoided at all costs to maximize SEO? And on mobile, most websites are going to either hide or remove content into tabs. Is that negatively impacting SEO today in 2019?
All right, Gian, that's a tough one. There's a lot of stuff there. So I think, if there's specific phrases that you want to rank for, and if that is only visible via hover over and it's not crawled like a regular HTML module block of text, then my recommendation would be to consider having those specific phrases in copy above or below or somewhere else on the page, on the H1, somewhere else that it's going to render on everybody's device. Because like you said, it may not, if something's not rendering on mobile or it's only rendering on desktop, again, you're missing out on a 50% or more of traffic that, that can't see that copy. So I think that's something to consider is just, how else can you add copy around video or resources? Search engines may still be able to crawl. It really depends on how that copy is overlaid on video, but some of that copy could be crawled. But if you really want to rank for a term, you may, just make sure you include it somewhere else on the page. Sometimes on some resource centers, they let you add descriptions above or below the resource itself. Regarding accordions, it kind of depends on how they're implemented. Google can still crawl content within those. But if there's specific phrases you're trying to rank for and own in search, then you want to make it easy for both users to see those keywords and those phrases, and you also want to make it easy for search engine spiders to crawl. So I hope that helps, but I think it's all about making it easier for your user to see that and easier for search engines to crawl at the same time.
Awesome. Good job, Paul. I know there was a lot in there. Okay, so Brian sent over a few questions, and also for those of you who are on this webinar live, feel free to enter your questions into the Q&A. so we can tackle those while it's kind of fresh and hot in your mind here. But one of Brian's questions was, how do I optimize my content to appear as an enhanced SERP in Google's knowledge graph?
Yeah, good question, Brian. As we talked about today, there's more and more SERP features showing up. So search engines, they use a variety of different features to improve the overall user experience, to keep people on Google longer, to help them find their answers. And so, one first place to start there, if you're trying to optimize for a specific snippet, is seeing if there's schema markup that you can mark up whatever you're trying to have appear within that SERP. We showed the SEMrush example of being able to see what types of featured snippets show up for a specific keyword or a topic. So I think it's important to analyze the SERPs and understand the types of features that you can even show up for in the first place. There's certain topics that they just don't have. There's no SERP feature that aligns with that, and Google's not going to show that. So I think you need to look at your topics, see what types of SERP features are showing up, and then in some ways reverse engineer like how you can get those same sorts of signals. Sometimes it's formatting, sometimes it's the intent that you're writing to help within the copy and understanding the intent of people's search and writing for that. Sometimes it's markup, schema markup like we talked about. But I think you just need to know like what SERP features are even available for you to be able to rank for, and kind of approaching from that angle. And that'll help you kind of pinpoint a plan to start targeting those, ranking as those types of features.
Awesome. Let's see here. Here's a question live from Grace. Grace says, my company name is Simply This Media. They're a video production company. However, it seems that Google is having a hard time recognizing the word this. Therefore, when I type my business name on Google, it comes up with this other UK-based company called Simply Media. What is the best way to work around this?
Yeah, I can see how that would happen. When you do a search in search engines, it's Google may not, they don't just provide the exact results for one specific term. They may think that you're searching for something that's a misspelling of that or another variation of that keyword. So I can see how that would happen. It kind of depends on where you're trying to target customers. If you're trying to target customers that are just based in the US, you can set up Google Search Console and you can say, look, I don't just want to target customers in the US. So like you can provide that signal to search engines. If you're just a US based company, you may also make sure you have those US based features on your website that search engines can crawl, like your address and the name of your business and maybe a map of where you are. And you can include that information on your About Us page. And that's another place you can use schema, as we talked about, is like marking up your business information on your About Us page with US-based schema. So I think it really depends on where you're trying to target that, but I can definitely see that as you're competing against another business that can show up that way. And over time, depending on the size of the Simply This Media versus Simply Media, the reverse could happen. It just depends on the size of that organization or not. It's always tough when there's competing brand names to try to outrank them. There's always going to be some level of competition. I think we've even seen some other SmartBug like companies out there, and we've been writing content and building links for a long time, and we outrank all other SmartBug companies. But there are others out there that they're probably in the same situation.
Hey, that actually feeds that your answer there feeds quite well into one of our next questions, which was about blogging and how blogging helps keyword rankings, and how often do folks need to write to see benefits?
It really depends on the competition in your vertical and who you're trying to target, how broad your vertical is. There's not really a right answer like, oh, you need to blog 4 times a month to like see success. It really depends on the vertical. If there's a ton of competition in your marketplace, And if there's not a lot of content written about the topic already, then you may consider having a higher volume of content compared to a vertical that's completely saturated with competitors as well as completely saturated with content. So there's not really a right answer to it. I think it's important that the content exists out there when users are searching for that specific query. But you need to get kind of somewhat specific to, again, the niche that you're targeting, the location that you're targeting. If you're, for example, if you're a plumber in a specific city, there's like, how can you create content so that search engines identify you as a plumber in a specific city? It may not be you writing blog posts about the best practices of a specific plumbing tactic, but maybe it's creating content about having the location-based content on your website that helps search engines understand that you're an organization in that area. And sometimes it's not through a blog post. Sometimes it's through a page on your website that shows, look, here's 5 different customers I've worked with in this city. So don't think like it always has to be a specific volume of content, of blog content that you're pushing out. You do want your website to be fresh, and blogging helps you keep your website fresh, but there's not an exact number.
Right. Fair enough. All right, Paul, you know what? I think you've given us so much great information today. It's been phenomenal. So thank you so much. I thought it'd be a fun treat. You don't know this is coming. I'm going to ask you a couple of fun fact rapid fire questions about yourself. All right.
Okay.
You've answered for us. Let's learn a little bit about you. You game?
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Let's keep it simple. What's your favorite color?
Cerulean blue.
And what's your favorite meal?
Burritos with extra spicy salsa.
And to go with that, what's your favorite beer?
Oh, this would have to be an IPA from Trillium out of Boston.
Nice. Favorite vacation spot?
I would say Flathead Lake in Montana.
Ooh, okay. And last one related, a place you've always wanted to go.
I've always wanted to go to Thailand in Eastern Asia, and I hope to make it there someday, hopefully soon. We're starting to get more flight deals pushed our way, so hopefully the next couple of years.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Paul, for sharing your knowledge. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this webinar. As I said in the beginning, this has been recorded. You'll get this in your inbox along with the slides that Paul's put together tomorrow. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reply to the email, reach out, and we're happy to continue answering questions. Thank you all, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.